4:30 in the morning on the 8th of March, 2026. Al Udeid Air Base, Qatar. The air was cold and dry. It carried the faint, bitter scent of desert dust, mixed with the sharp chemical bite of jet fuel. The massive airbase was a sprawling grid of orange lights against the deep black of the Qatari desert. Silence held the flight line in a brief, fragile grip. Then the klaxon shattered everything. It was a low, vibrating howl that tore through the barracks and the hardened hangars. It was a sound designed to trigger adrenaline. In the ready room, 4 pilots from the 777 fighter squadron were already moving before the sound reached its full volume. They did not speak. There was no time for words. They grabbed their flight helmets. They pulled on their high-pressure G-suits. The metal zippers made a series of sharp, rhythmic clicks in the quiet room. Outside, the hardened aircraft shelters groaned as the massive steel doors slid open. Inside each shelter sat an F-35 Alpha Lightning II stealth fighter. The aircraft looked like jagged shadows. Their gray skins were coated in radar-absorbent material that felt like velvet to the touch. Maintenance crews moved with practiced, frantic precision. They pulled away the yellow power cables. They cleared the wheel chocks. Major Elias Thorne, callsign Viper, climbed the yellow ladder to his cockpit. He felt the weight of the survival vest against his chest. He settled into the seat. The cockpit smelled of oxygen and electronic ozone. He connected his air hose and the communications lead. His helmet-mounted display system came to life. A faint green glow illuminated his face. Data began to stream across his visor. Viper 1. Checking in, he said. His voice was flat and professional. Viper 1. Al Udeid ground. You are cleared for immediate scramble. 9 targets detected crossing the maritime boundary. Speed, 500 knots. Heading 200. You have priority, the controller replied. The engine start sequence began. A high-pitched whine started deep inside the fuselage of the F-35. It climbed in frequency until it became a scream that vibrated in the teeth of the ground crew. Then the Pratt & Whitney Phone 135 engine ignited. A low-frequency rumble shook the concrete floor of the hangar. A blue and orange flame flickered in the dark at the rear of the jet. The heat from the exhaust distorted the air, making the desert stars behind the hangar shimmer and dance. Viper pushed the throttle forward. The 60,000-pound fighter began to roll. Behind him, 3 more stealth fighters followed in a tight line. They moved like predators out of their dens. They reached the edge of the primary runway. The 2-mile stretch of asphalt was lined with white lights that vanished into the darkness. Viper flight. Line up and wait, Thorne commanded over the encrypted radio. The 4 jets turned onto the centerline. The wind caught the smell of burnt kerosene and whipped it across the wings. Thorne looked at his tactical display. 9 red icons were moving fast over the dark waters of the Persian Gulf. They were Iranian 4 Phantoms and MiG-29 fighters. They were moving toward the carrier strike group. They were looking for a fight. Thorne took a deep breath. He felt the cool oxygen flow into his lungs. He gripped the side stick controller. His thumb rested just above the weapon release button. Viper flight. Burner on my mark, Thorne said. 3, 2, 1. Mark. 4 throttles slammed forward into the afterburner detent. The roar was physical. It was a wall of sound that slammed into the desert floor. Huge plumes of white-hot fire erupted from the tailpipes of the 4 fighters. The acceleration was immediate and violent. It pressed Thorne back into his seat with the force of 2 Gs. The runway lights became long, white streaks. The nose of the F-35 lifted. The tires spun one last time before the landing gear retracted into the belly with a heavy mechanical thud. The 4 fighters punched through the thin layer of morning mist. They climbed at a 60-degree angle. The desert floor fell away into a dark void. Thorne looked up. The sky was turning a deep purple in the east. The first hint of dawn was a thin line of red on the horizon. They were at 10,000 feet, then 20,000. The air was getting thinner and colder. The cockpit glass began to frost at the edges. The 4 F-35 fighters maintained a spread formation. They were invisible to the enemy radar. They were ghosts in the machine. Viper 1, we have a clean track, Thorne said. Contact, 9 bogies. range 80 miles. They have no idea we are here. The hunt had begun. 4:45 in the morning. High above the black expanse of the Persian Gulf, the air at 30,000 feet was minus 50 degrees. Outside the pressurized cockpit of the F-35 Alpha, the world was a void of freezing silence. Inside, the only sound was the rhythmic hiss of pure oxygen entering Major Thorne's lungs, and the low, steady hum of the avionics cooling fans. The 4 stealth fighters moved in a wide, staggered line. They were spaced 3 miles apart. To a casual observer or an old-fashioned radar, the sky was empty. But Thorne's visor told a different story. His helmet-mounted display was a marvel of engineering. He didn't need to look at a screen. He looked through the floor of his own aircraft. The distributed aperture system used 6 infrared cameras to stitch together a 360-degree view. He could see the heat of the waves below and the cold stars above. Viper flight, state fuel and weapons, Thorne said. Viper 2, solid, 12,000 pounds. 4 AIM-120 missiles, 2 AIM-9X Sidewinders. Viper 3, solid, full load. Viper 4, solid, ready for the push. The voices were crisp. There was no static. The data link between the 4 aircraft was sharing every piece of information instantly. If Thorne saw a target, every pilot in his flight saw it. They were a single, 4-headed predator. Below them, the Persian Gulf shimmered with a ghostly, bioluminescent green light where the waves broke against the sides of oil tankers. The ships looked like tiny, unmoving splinters. To the north, the coastline of Iran was a jagged silhouette of dark mountains. A new symbol appeared on Thorne's visor. It was a yellow hexagon, then another, then 7 more. The symbols began to pulse. Viper 1, this is Sentry. Overlord is online. The voice of the E-3 Sentry AWACS controller crackled in his ears. We have the 9-ball, 2 MiG-29 Fulcrums on the high side, 7 4 Phantoms below 10,000 feet. They are pushing hard toward the carrier. Speed is now Mach 0.9 to 5. They are radiating. They are looking for the fleet. Copy. Sentry. Viper 1 is engaging master arm, Thorne replied. He reached out and flipped a switch on his right-hand console. The digital display in his helmet changed. The green circles of the navigation mode were replaced by the red, aggressive brackets of the combat system. He felt a familiar tightening in his chest. His heart rate climbed to 90 beats per minute. The enemy formation was 50 miles away. At their current closing speed, they would be within visual range in less than 4 minutes. The Iranian pilots were flying with their radars at full power. They were screaming their presence into the night, desperate to find the American carrier. They had no idea that 4 stealth fighters were sitting directly above them, looking down at their heat signatures. Viper flight, split into pairs, Thorne commanded. 2 and 4, take the high MiG-29s. 3, you stay on my wing. We take the Phantoms. Copy, Viper 1. Moving to intercept. Thorne pushed his throttle forward slightly. He felt the jet accelerate. The vibration in the airframe increased. The wind noise against the canopy became a faint, high-pitched whistle. He looked at the red icons. The 4 Phantoms were old jets. Heavy and loud. They were relics of a different era. But they were armed with heavy anti-ship missiles. If even one of them got close to the carrier, the results would be catastrophic. The range counter on Thorne's visor began to tick down. 40 miles, 35, 30. Targeting data is live, Thorne said. Viper 3, I have the lead pair. You take the trailers. Viper 3 has the trailers. Locked and ready. Thorne gripped the control stick. He could feel the tiny tremors of the jet's flight computers making thousands of corrections every second. He was flying a computer with wings, a weapon designed to kill from the shadows. The cold Gulf air outside was about to be torn apart by the heat of rocket motors. Sentry, Viper 1. We have a solid track on all 9 targets. Requesting permission to engage. There was a 5-second pause. To Thorne, it felt like an hour. He watched the red icons move closer to the invisible line in the water that meant war. Viper 1, you are cleared hot. Defend the fleet. Weapons free. Viper flight. Thorne's voice was like ice. Engage. Exactly 5 in the morning. The horizon was a thin, glowing wire of orange. It separated the black water from the deep indigo of the fading night. The air at 30,000 feet was crystal clear. It was so cold that the moisture from the engine exhaust froze instantly into thin, white ice crystals. "Viper flight. Doors open," Major Thorne commanded. Underneath the smooth, gray bellies of the 4 F-35 Alpha fighters, the internal weapons bay doors snapped open. It took less than a second. For that brief moment, the stealth profile of the aircraft was broken. The jets became visible to enemy sensors as jagged, flickering ghosts. Inside the dark bays, the AIM-120 advanced medium-range air-to-air missiles hung on their launch rails. They were sleek, white cylinders. They looked like oversized darts. Each one carried a high-explosive blast fragmentation warhead. "Viper 1, Fox 3, Thorne said. He squeezed the red trigger on the front of his control stick. There was a heavy mechanical clunk that resonated through the floor of the cockpit. The pneumatic ejector shattered the silence. It punched the missile downward, away from the jet. For half a second, the missile fell in a dead tumble. Then, the solid-fuel rocket motor ignited. A brilliant flash of white light illuminated the underside of Thorne's jet. A pillar of thick, white smoke erupted. The missile shrieked forward. It accelerated to Mach 4 in an instant. It left a long, straight scar of exhaust across the morning sky. Viper 2, Fox 3. Viper 3, Fox 3. Viper 4, Fox 3. 3 more streaks of fire joined the first. The 4 missiles climbed slightly. They began their long, silent glide toward the targets 25 miles away. They were flying on internal inertial guidance. They did not need the fighters to guide them. They were independent hunters. Thorne watched the data on his visor. The red icons of the Iranian formation were still flying in a tight wedge. They were still scanning the water with their heavy radars. They were looking for the gray hull of an American carrier. They had no idea that 4 white-hot spears were screaming toward them at 3,000 miles per hour. "Missiles are active," Thorne whispered. At a distance of 10 miles from the targets, the tiny radar dishes in the noses of the AIM-120 missiles turned on. They began to pulse. They found the heat and the metal of the Iranian jets. Suddenly, the red icons on Thorne's display began to scatter. "They see it," Thorne said. "The 9-ball is breaking formation." On the Iranian side, the cockpit warning systems were finally screaming. The pilots were slammed with the sound of a terminal radar lock. They pulled their heavy jets into frantic, high-G turns. They pumped out clouds of silver chaff and burning magnesium flares. The sky below Thorne was suddenly filled with tiny, glittering lights. The Iranian 4 Phantoms were diving toward the water. They were trying to hide in the radar clutter of the waves. The MiG-29 fighters pulled hard into the vertical. They were trying to outclimb the incoming fire. Viper 2. "Your targets are breaking high," Thorne warned. "I see them." Switching to the high-side intercept, Viper 2 replied. Thorne watched the first missile close the gap. It was a computer-simulated line on his visor. The line touched the red icon of the lead 4 Phantom. 20 miles away, the morning silence was obliterated. The first AIM-120 missile did not hit the jet. It didn't have to. The proximity fuse sensed the mass of the Phantom. It detonated 5 meters from the cockpit. 20 pounds of high explosive shattered the air. A cloud of tungsten cubes shredded the Iranian jet. The left wing was sheared off at the root. The engine swallowed a piece of the fuselage and exploded. An orange fireball blossomed in the dark. It looked like a small, angry sun. "Splash 1, Thorne said. 2 seconds later, a second explosion ripped through the air. A MiG-29 had been caught in its climb. The missile punched through the tail section. The twin engines erupted in a synchronized blast of fire and metal. The aircraft disintegrated. It became a rain of burning debris that fell toward the sea. Splash 2. The Iranian formation was no longer a unit. It was a collection of panicked individuals. They were screaming on the open radio channels. They were no longer the hunters. They were the prey. 5:10 in the morning. The sun was a bruised purple sliver on the horizon, casting long, distorted shadows across the white-capped waves of the Persian Gulf. The air inside the cockpit of Viper 1 was thick with the scent of recycled oxygen and the faint, metallic tang of the electronics running at maximum capacity. Major Thorne felt the seat vibrate against his spine as he pushed the throttle forward. The F-35 Alpha surged, the engine's roar muffled by the pressurized canopy but felt in every bone of his body. On his visor, the 7 remaining red icons were frantic. They were no longer flying in a professional military formation. They were a swarm of angry hornets, scattering in every direction to avoid the invisible death coming from the sky. The 6-4 Phantoms were diving low, their old engines leaving thick trails of black soot that stood out against the morning light. The single remaining MiG-29 was climbing, banking hard to the left, its pilot desperately searching for a visual contact. "Viper flight, stay in the shadows," Thorne commanded. "Do not go to afterburner. Keep the heat signature low. They are looking for our exhaust. Viper 2, copy. I am moving into the blind spot of the MiG. 6 o'clock low." Thorne watched the tactical map. The Iranian MiG-29 pilot was good. He was performing a series of high-G barrel rolls, trying to use his onboard infrared sensors to catch a glimpse of the F-35's engine heat. It was a game of hide-and-seek played at 1,000 miles per hour. The distance was closing fast. 20 miles. 15. They were entering the heart of the engagement envelope. This was the moment of highest risk. If the F-35 fighters got too close, their stealth advantage would be negated by the human eye. Viper 3, target the 2 Phantoms on the right flank, Thorne said. I am taking the center pair. We need to clear the path to the carrier. Viper 3, locked, ready to send it. Thorne looked down through the floor of his jet. The distributed aperture system showed him the 2-4 Phantoms below. They were heavy with fuel and missiles, struggling to maneuver in the thick air near the sea surface. He could see the heat from their twin J-79 engines glowing like 2 red coals on his display. Master arm is still hot, Thorne whispered to himself. His thumb hovered over the weapon release. He felt the cold sweat running down his neck, soaking into the fire-retardant fabric of his flight suit. The G-force was a constant, heavy pressure on his chest, making every breath a deliberate effort. Viper 1, Fox 3, Thorne called out. He felt the familiar jolt as another AIM-120 missile was ejected from the internal bay. The white cylinder fell for a heartbeat before the rocket motor kicked in with a violent burst of light. The missile didn't climb this time. It dove straight down, a white streak of vengeance aimed at the lead Phantom. Viper 3, Fox 3. 2 away. 2 more missiles shrieked into the abyss. The sky was now a chaotic web of white smoke trails. The Iranian pilots saw the new threats. They began to pump out hundreds of magnesium flares. The orange sparks fell toward the water like a waterfall of fire, a desperate attempt to blind the incoming missiles. But the AIM-120 was not looking for heat. It was locked onto the radar reflection of the heavy metal airframes. The flares were useless. Thorne watched the first missile close the distance. On his visor, the red bracket around the Phantom began to flash rapidly. The Iranian pilot tried a desperate split-S maneuver, diving toward the waves at a suicidal angle. He was trying to pull 7 Gs in a 50-year-old airframe. It didn't matter. The missile adjusted its flight path in a microsecond. It didn't miss. It slammed into the tail section of the Phantom. The explosion was a brilliant, jagged flash that illuminated the sea for miles. The entire rear of the jet disappeared. The front half, containing the 2 pilots, tumbled end over end into the water at 600 knots. There were no parachutes. Splash 3, Thorne said. His voice was a flat, rhythmic monotone. To his right, another fireball erupted. Viper 3's missile had found its mark. The second Phantom had been hit mid-turn. The wing had snapped off, and the jet had spiraled into the water, exploding on impact with the surface. Splash 4, Viper 3 reported. There were 5 left, 1 MiG-29 and 4 Phantoms. They were now less than 10 miles away. They were closing the gap. They were getting into the range where they could see the gray shapes of the F-35 fighters. Viper flight, the merge is coming, Thorne warned. Switch to Sidewinders. Get ready to turn and burn. The long-range fight was over. The knives were coming out. 5:12 in the morning. Latitude 26 degrees north. longitude 53 degrees east. The sun was a blinding orange disk. It sat heavy on the horizon. The Persian Gulf was no longer black. It was a deep, bruised purple. The water reflected the orange light in long, jagged streaks. Major Thorne felt the sweat stinging his eyes. He blinked it away. The pressure in the cockpit was steady. The hum of the electronics was a constant, low-frequency vibration in his skull. Viper 2, you have the lead. I am coming around the side, Thorne said. The merge happened in a heartbeat. The 4 remaining Iranian 4 Phantoms and the single MiG-29 crossed the American flight path. The relative closing speed was over 1,500 knots. It was a blur of gray and green metal. Thorne felt the wake turbulence of a passing Phantom. It slammed into his jet like a physical blow. His F-35 shuddered. The flight computers chirped as they fought to stabilize the wings. The Iranian MiG-29 pilot was a veteran. He did not run. He pulled his nose up. He used the massive thrust of his twin engines to stand the jet on its tail. He was looking for a high-deflection shot. Viper 2, he is on your nose. Brake left, Thorne shouted. Viper 2 reacted instantly. He slammed the side stick to the left. He kicked the rudder. The F-35 groaned under the strain of 9 Gs. Thorne saw the pilot's head slump forward through the camera feed. The G-suit inflated with a sharp hiss. It crushed the pilot's legs to keep the blood in his brain. The MiG-29 fired. A streak of fire erupted from its wing. It was an R-73 infrared missile. It curved through the air, chasing the heat of Viper 2's engine. Viper 2 pumped out a string of flares. They looked like burning stars. The enemy missile bit on a flare. It exploded 50 feet behind the American jet. The shock wave cracked against the canopy like a hammer. Now it was the Americans' turn. The trigger was squeezed. The AIM-9X Sidewinder shrieked off the rail of Viper 2. It was a white column of fire. It punched backward through the thin morning air. The heat blast washed across the fuselage of the F-35. The smell of burning propellant filled the cockpit air intakes for a split second. The smoke rose in a dense white column. It blotted out the sun for 3 full seconds. The warhead punched straight through the left engine intake of the MiG-29. It detonated inside the compressor stages. The engine erupted instantly. It was a violent, jagged burst of yellow flame. Thousands of pieces of titanium blades were sent flying through the airframe. The entire tail section was shredded. The wing roots groaned and then snapped. A fireball bleached the sky white. The Iranian pilot fought the controls. His hands moved in a blur of panic. The jet rolled violently to the left. It was a death spiral. He reached for the ejection handle. He pulled it just as the aircraft broke into 3 large pieces. The seat fired. He was thrown into the freezing air. The jet fell straight down. It hit the water with a massive geyser of white foam and black oil. Black smoke rose from the wreckage, settling into the sea. The burning pieces were still above water when the radio channels went silent for exactly 3 seconds. Splash 5. Viper 2 gasped. His voice was ragged from the G-load. But the fight was not over. The 4 Phantoms were still there. They were closing in. One Phantom pilot was aggressive. He ignored the missiles. He dove toward Thorne. He lined up his nose. The 20mm cannon in the nose of the Phantom erupted. A stream of tracer rounds tore through the air. They were bright red streaks. They zipped past Thorne's canopy. He could hear the low, rhythmic thud of the cannon fire. One round clipped the edge of his right wing. It tore a hole the size of a fist in the composite skin. The aircraft shuddered. Viper 1 is hit! I am taking fire, Thorne yelled. He pulled the jet into a vertical climb. The sky turned from purple to blue. As he rose, the air grew thinner. He could see the 4 Phantoms below him. They were circling like sharks. They were low on fuel. They were desperate. The smell of burning oil and hot metal hung in his cockpit. The adrenaline was a cold fire in his veins. He looked at his wing. The damage was minor, but it was a reminder. This was a real war. 5:15 in the morning. Latitude 25 degrees 50 minutes north. Longitude 54 degrees 8 minutes east. The morning sun was now a blinding gold coin, low on the horizon, turning the cockpit of Viper 1 into a greenhouse of searing heat, and electronic ozone. Major Thorne felt the vibration in his right wing, a rhythmic, jagged thrumming from the 20mm shell hole. Viper 3, I am defensive. Lead Phantom is on my 6, Thorne shouted. His breath was a ragged, mechanical hiss through the oxygen mask. He slammed the side stick to the left, then kicked the rudder hard right. The F-35 Alpha performed a violent, rolling scissors maneuver. The G-meter on his visor spiked to 9.2. The world began to gray out at the edges of his vision. His G-suit slammed shut around his legs and abdomen like a giant's fist, forcing the blood back toward his brain. Below him, the Iranian 4 Phantom was a dark, camouflaged shape against the sparkling water. It was an old machine, but it had massive engines and a pilot who was willing to die. The Phantom pulled into the vertical, its twin J-79 engines dumping raw fuel into the afterburners. 2 long tongues of orange flame pushed the heavy jet upward. I have him! Viper 1! Breaking cover! Viper 3 called out. The second F-35 dived from 30,000 feet. It moved like a falling spear. The pilot didn't use a missile. He was too close for a radar lock. He switched to the GAU-22 25mm rotary cannon. The trigger was squeezed. The 4-barrel gun, hidden behind a stealth door on the left side of the fuselage, spun to life at 3,000 rounds per minute. A stream of armor-piercing incendiary rounds tore through the air. They were a solid line of white light. The sound was not a series of pops, but a continuous, guttural growl that shook the entire airframe of the F-35. The rounds walked across the top of the Phantom's fuselage. The warheads punched straight through the spine of the Iranian jet, severing the hydraulic lines and the control cables. The heavy metal skin was shredded like wet paper. The Phantom's left engine exploded instantly as a 25mm shell found the high-pressure turbine. The jet didn't just catch fire, it blew apart. The cockpit section was sheared clean off by the force of the internal explosion. A fireball that bleached the sky white erupted, sending 6 tons of burning titanium and aluminum flying in every direction. Splash 6, Viper 3 yelled. The remaining 3 Phantoms saw the explosion. They broke formation in a blind panic. One dived for the water, while the other 2 split left and right. They were no longer trying to reach the carrier. They were trying to reach the Iranian coast, 40 miles away. Viper flight, do not let them reset, Thorne commanded. He ignored the vibration in his wing. He rolled his jet inverted, hanging in his straps, as he looked down at the retreating targets. His helmet-mounted display tracked the 2 Phantoms splitting on the horizon. He slaved his remaining AIM-9X Sidewinder to his eye movement. A high-pitched, growling tone filled his ears. The missile's heat seeker had found the glowing exhaust of the target on the right. Viper 1, Fox 2. The Sidewinder shrieked off the rail. It didn't fly straight. It performed a violent, high G turn the moment it cleared the wing. The missile was a blur of white light and kinetic energy. It chased the Phantom through a desperate brake turn. The infrared seeker head ignored the flares the Iranian pilot was pumping out. It stayed locked on the 3,000-degree heat of the engine nozzle. The missile drove into the tailpipe and detonated. The shockwave compressed the chest of everyone within a mile. The Phantom vanished in a cloud of black smoke and orange fire. Splash 7, Thorne said. He felt a cold, hard satisfaction. The water below was now littered with burning debris. Large sections of wings and tail fins bobbed on the waves, trailing long plumes of black oil smoke into the morning air. The heat blast from the last explosion washed across Thorne's canopy, momentarily raising the temperature inside the cockpit by 10 degrees. Viper 2, Viper 4, clean up the last 2, Thorne ordered. I am bingo fuel. I have to RTB. Copy. Viper 1. We have the runners. Closing in now. The hunt was almost over. The sky was beginning to settle, but the smell of burning oil and the sharp chemical bite of missile propellant remained, hanging in the thin, cold air of the Persian Gulf. 5:17 in the morning. Latitude 25 degrees 42 minutes north. Longitude 54 degrees 15 minutes east. The sun was now fully above the horizon, a harsh, white-gold glare that turned the Persian Gulf into a sheet of hammered brass. Major Thorne checked his fuel gauge. The digital readout pulsed a steady, warning amber. 5,000 pounds of fuel remained. With the drag from the hole in his right wing, the flight computer was recalculating his range every 10 seconds. Viper 2, Viper 4. "You are on the clock," Thorne said. His voice was tight. The physical toll of the 9G turns beginning to manifest as a dull, throbbing ache at the base of his skull. Viper 2. Copy. I have the high side runner. Target is in 4 Phantom. Heading 030. Speed Mach 0.9. He is dumping fuel to go faster. 2 miles below Thorne, the 7th and 8th Iranian jets were separated by 3 miles of open water. They were no longer fighting. They were racing for the safety of the Iranian coastline, their afterburners twin pinpricks of orange light against the blue-green sea. Viper 4, piloted by Captain Stitch Miller, pushed his nose down. The F-35 Alpha accelerated through the sound barrier with a silent, internal shudder. A white vapor cone, a Pratt Glauert singlet, blossomed around the fuselage for a split second before vanishing as the jet went supersonic. Viper 4. Fox 3. The final AIM-120 missile was ejected from the internal bay. It was a cold, mechanical separation, followed by a violent eruption of white smoke. The missile didn't climb. It performed a lead pursuit intercept, calculating the point where the Phantom would be in 10 seconds. The Iranian pilot saw the smoke trail. He didn't turn. He pushed his nose further down, his jet screaming as it neared the structural limit of the airframe. He was at 500 feet above the water, the salt spray from the waves hitting his canopy. The warhead didn't care about the altitude. It adjusted its fins with a series of high-speed mechanical winds. It closed the gap at 3 times the speed of sound. The proximity fuse triggered exactly 4 meters above the Phantom's canopy. The blast wave threw the heavy jet toward the water. The pressure compressed every chest in the Iranian cockpit, killing the crew instantly before the metal even began to tear. The Phantom slammed into the sea at 700 miles per hour. It didn't sink, it disintegrated. A mile-long streak of white foam and shredded aluminum marked the impact. Splash 8, Viper 4 reported. The last Phantom was alone. It was less than 20 miles from the Iranian coast. The pilot could see the mountains of his homeland. He banked hard, trying to hide in the shadows of the coastal cliffs. Viper 2. He is mine, the wingman said. He didn't use a missile. He closed the distance, using the raw power of his engine. He came up from the 6 o'clock position, low and fast. He switched to the GAU-22 cannon. The sound of metal tearing filled the air as a 3-second burst of 25mm rounds shredded the last Phantom's tail. The rudder was blown off. The left elevator was severed. The jet pitched up violently, then stalled. It fell backward, its engines coughing out thick black smoke before they flamed out. The aircraft hit a limestone cliff face on the shoreline. A fireball erupted, a jagged orange scar against the brown rock. It burned for 5 seconds before the fuel was exhausted, leaving only a black smudge of soot and the twisted remains of an ejection seat. Splash 9. The sky is clear, Viper 2 said. A dead silence fell over the radio. The roaring of the engines and the screaming of the missiles were gone, replaced by the steady, rhythmic breathing of the 4 American pilots. Thorne looked down. 9 plumes of black smoke rose from the water and the coastline. The Persian Gulf was still. The carrier strike group was safe. The heat blast from the last engagement was fading, leaving only the cold, dry air of the high-altitude cockpit and the smell of ozone. Viper flight, join on me, Thorne said, heading 220. Let's go home. 5:25 in the morning. The Persian Gulf was now a mirror of molten gold under the rising sun. The violence of the last 20 minutes had left a physical scar on the world below. 9 separate plumes of oily, black smoke rose in straight vertical lines from the surface of the water and the jagged rocks of the Iranian coastline. They looked like funeral pyres marking the end of the engagement. The air was still. The screaming of the missiles and the thunder of the afterburners had vanished. replaced by the steady, rhythmic hiss of the oxygen system in Thorne's helmet. "Viper flight, check in. I want a visual on my right wing," Thorne commanded. His voice was lower now, the adrenaline beginning to recede, leaving a hollow, metallic taste in his mouth. He adjusted the side stick, feeling the subtle resistance of the aircraft. The F-35 Alpha was a fly-by-wire machine, but even the world's most advanced flight computers could not fully hide the physical reality of a hole in the airframe. "Viper 2, I am on your right side. Moving in," the wingman reported. The second stealth fighter banked gracefully, its gray, velvet-like skin catching the morning light. It slid into position 50 feet from Thorne's wingtip. "Viper 1, I see the damage. You have a clean puncture through the leading edge of the right wing, about 3 feet from the tip. It is a 20mm shell hole. No fire, no fluid leaks. The composite skin is frayed, but the internal spar looks solid. How is she handling?" "She is singing a bit," Thorne replied. He could hear it, a high-pitched, eerie whistle that vibrated through the cockpit floor. It was the sound of air screaming through the jagged metal at 400 knots. The flight computer was compensating for the asymmetric lift, holding the right wing up with a constant 5-degree deflection of the flaperons. The aircraft felt heavy, like it was pulling through thick mud. "Viper flight, Sentry. Overlord is watching your 6, the voice from the E-3 Sentry airborne warning and control system crackled. "The Iranian mainland has gone quiet. No further scrambles detected. Their radar sites are in passive mode. You are 60 miles from the Qatari coast. You are cleared to descend to 10,000 feet. Copy, Sentry." "Viper flight is descending," Thorne said. The 4 F-35 fighters tilted their noses down in unison. They moved like a single organism, a formation of ghosts returning from a graveyard. Below them, the waters of the Gulf were dotted with white foam. Thorne could see a long, shimmering slick of jet fuel where the MiG-29 had gone down. It reflected the colors of the rainbow, a beautiful and toxic smear on the ocean surface. The physical toll of the combat began to hit the pilots. Thorne's neck muscles were tight from the 9G turns. His flight suit was damp with sweat, and the skin beneath his mask was itchy and irritated. He looked at his hands. They were steady, but the knuckles were white where he gripped the throttle. To the west, the coastline of Qatar appeared as a thin, tan line between the blue of the sea and the pale sky. The massive industrial shapes of the natural gas terminals at Ras Laffan stood out like steel cathedrals. "Viper flight, state remaining fuel," Thorne said. "Viper 2, 3,200 pounds. I am light." "Viper 3, 3,500. "Viper 4, 3,000. They were all pushing the limit. The high-speed intercept and the extended use of afterburners had drained their internal tanks. They didn't have enough fuel for a second fight or a long loiter. They needed the runway at Al Udeid, and they needed it on the first pass. "Keep it tight, gentlemen," Thorne said. "Viper 1 will take the lead for the long straight-in approach. Stitch, you take the tail. If my wing gives me any trouble, I want you to call it out immediately." The 4 jets slowed as they approached the coast. The landing gear doors on the bellies of the fighters cycled open with a heavy, mechanical hum. The 3 wheels on each jet locked into place. Thorne felt the drag increase. The whistle from the wing hole changed pitch, becoming a low, mournful moan. He watched the digital horizon on his visor. The aircraft was stable, but he could feel the computer working at 10,000 cycles per second to keep the damaged wing level. He was flying on a razor's edge of technology and luck. 30 miles to go. The desert heat began to rise from the sand below, creating a layer of turbulence that made the jets dance and shimmy. Thorne ignored the movement. He focused on the white line of the runway appearing in the distance. 6 in the morning. Latitude 25 degrees, 7 minutes north. Longitude 51 degrees, 13 minutes east. The desert heat was already rising from the Qatari sands, creating a shimmering, liquid haze over the 2-mile stretch of concrete that was the Al Udeid runway. Major Thorne squinted against the glare of the white-hot sun reflecting off the desert floor. The cockpit of Viper 1 was stifling. The cooling system was struggling to offset the external temperature and the heat radiating from the massive avionics racks behind his seat. Al Udeid Tower, Viper 1. Flight of 4 F-35 Alphas on a 5-mile final. Requesting immediate landing. I have structural damage to the right wing. I am declared an emergency, Thorne said. Viper 1, Al Udeid Tower. You are cleared to land, runway 3 to 4. Right. Emergency vehicles are on the roll. The wind is 10 knots from the northwest. The deck is yours. Thorne looked through the floor of his jet using the infrared cameras. He could see the yellow fire trucks and the white ambulances racing along the taxiways, their lights flashing in the morning dust. He felt the heavy thud of the landing gear locking into place. The drag increased instantly, and the high-pitched whistle from the shell hole in his wing became a low, vibrating moan that he felt in his teeth. Viper flight, break into trail. I am taking the center, Thorne commanded. The 4 stealth fighters separated. They moved like gray ghosts through the heat haze. Thorne focused on the green symbols on his visor. He lined up the flight path marker with the beginning of the asphalt. At 200 feet, the ground rushed up to meet him. The desert scrub and the sand-colored hangars became a blur. The tires touched the concrete with a sharp, screaming chirp of rubber. The 60,000-pound fighter settled onto its struts. Thorne pulled the throttle to idle and engaged the wheel brakes. The aircraft pulled hard to the right as the damaged wing lost lift. He kicked the left rudder, fighting the machine until it straightened out. The 3 other fighters touched down in sequence behind him. They rolled out in a perfect, disciplined line. As Thorne slowed to taxi speed, the adrenaline finally evaporated, leaving him with a deep, crushing exhaustion. His hands shook slightly as he released the grip on the side stick. He taxied into the hardened aircraft shelter. The ground crew was already there, their faces covered in sand goggles and masks. They looked at the jagged, blackened hole in the right wing with wide eyes. Thorne shut down the engine. The scream of the turbine died away, replaced by the ticking sound of hot metal cooling in the desert air. He pushed the canopy open. The heat hit him like a physical wall, smelling of salt, dust, and burnt kerosene. He climbed down the ladder, his legs feeling heavy and clumsy. Viper 1, mission debrief is in the vault in 30 minutes, the squadron intelligence officer said, walking up to the wing. The Pentagon is already asking for the gun camera footage. 9 kills. No American losses. You just rewrote the balance of power in the Gulf. Thorne didn't answer immediately. He looked back at his aircraft. The gray skin was covered in a fine layer of salt from the low-altitude combat. He looked at the hole in the wing, then at the horizon, where the black smoke from the downed Iranian jets was finally beginning to dissipate. Check the pilot's heart rates during the merge, Thorne said, wiping the sweat from his forehead. And tell the maintenance crew they have 4 hours to patch that wing. We might be going back up by noon. The 4 pilots walked toward the debriefing room. They moved slowly, their flight suits stained with sweat and the salt of the sea. Behind them, the sun continued its climb, bleaching the sky to a pale, unforgiving white. The Persian Gulf was quiet again. The surface of the water as smooth as glass. Air superiority had been restored, but the silence felt temporary, a brief pause in a much longer story of fire and steel.